Beyond Reason Radio.
Universal Orlando asked to reopen theme parks in June. That's right here. According to the Orlando Sentinel, Universal Orlando is targeting June 5th, just 2 weeks away, as a day it will reopen to the public if the theme park gets approval from Orange County and Governor Ron DeSantis. And I'm reading this from the Orlando Sentinel, but I'm pretty sure they actually did get approval already on that, the task force. There were some members of the task force who actually abstained from voting because they thought they had a conflict of interest there, but I think the majority of the task force said that they approved the reopening. It would be the first of the theme parks to reopen in Central Florida after it shut down, along with Disney and SeaWorld on March 16th. SeaWorld told Vice President Mike Pence and DeSantis on Wednesday they would also like to open sometime in June. Disney has not indicated when it might reopen, and a spokeswoman said Thursday the company did not have any information it could share on dates. Universal Executive John Sproles presented the outline of a reopening plan today to Orange County Mayor Jerry Demings, the task force. He said, our plans have been weeks in the making and build upon our recent experience reopening portions of Universal Orlando City Walk. That was what the letter said to Demings. You will see we have created a new level of best practice for our already aggressive health, safety, and hygiene procedures. We have followed CDC guidelines, the advice of health officials, and recommendations from our own experts. The park would reopen June 3rd and 4th for some invited guests and annual pass holders to stress the system. Here it is. It says Universal proposal won unanimous approval from the task force, with 5 members abstaining because of conflict of interest. So they have to still get approval from Orange County and Governor DeSantis, but they did get approval from the task force. So very interesting to see what happens after Universal reopens. Tom, do you think people are going to
go? Sure. How packed it will be remains to be seen, obviously. But I bet you Disney and SeaWorld will not be too far behind.
Oh, yeah, they're not going to let this go too far. If they see that Universal is successful in reopening, they're going to want to reopen as well. I think people will go. I think there are, when it comes to the big theme parks, and if there are deals going on, which there might be, if Universal really wants people to go, they're going to find a way to get people in the parks. What I'm still worried about is a lot of the other stuff, a lot of the smaller tourist traps that they call them in Orlando. That's where I feel it's going to be a little bit harder to get people to go out and want to do things.
Yeah. But they'll have to be open just in case people do want to go by. But the encouraging thing, of course, is the fact that they're gearing back up, and all the service elements that service all the theme parks will also start to see some activity, I bet you.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do to try to protect the customers. I mean, I guess people will have to wear masks. They're going to do temperature checks, which is pretty easy to do. There'll be social distancing, but they're going to have to find a way to get around the long lines, because it's really the lines that most of the crowds are in place. You know, you can kind of spread out in a lot of the open areas.
But once you get inside closer to the rides, it's a little bit more compact, and the density is different.
That's what I'm really curious about. It'll be interesting. What if, this just kind of came to my head, what if masks really are just the solution? What if it is that wearing masks is what really stops the spread?
Well, apparently there are better masks than masks are better than others, and not everybody would necessarily have the good type.
Well, not only that, but people with asthma and lung conditions have real problem with masks because they can't breathe as well through them. So this is something I'm actually going to talk more about tomorrow morning, because I'm hosting Good Morning Orlando tomorrow morning, filling in for Bud.
You're everywhere. Man.
Of course. You know, what can I say? I really am everywhere. I'm the future, Tom Benson. Don't laugh in there.
I'm not.
Very interesting stuff. Something we'll talk more about tomorrow morning on Good Morning Orlando as I fill in for Bud. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee, the voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. We are on till 8 p.m. tonight here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. Of course, you can catch the podcast on the iHeartRadio app or anywhere podcasts are available. Yes, podcasts are a big thing now. I don't want to hear any excuses that podcasts are nothing when Joe Rogan just did a $100 million deal.
How about that?
With Spotify, with his podcasts.
You'd be happy with 1/10 of that.
Exactly. Come on, people, start listening to my podcast so I can get a deal with like my company here, IR Media or something. I'm just saying, No, but you can catch the podcast. It's absolutely free anywhere podcasts are available. And Mr. Tom Benson, that was his voice you heard in the control room. How are you, Tom?
I'm doing fine. We'll keep people posted on if the storm in south central Orange County and northern Osceola County continues or gets any worse. But right now, the severe thunderstorm warning, it will expire in about 3 minutes.
Is it not headed toward us? Because
no, it's not.
Okay, I mean, I saw some dark clouds, but I haven't heard any rain or anything.
It's stationary right now, so who knows where it will go afterwards.
Okay, so speaking of storms, they said that this hurricane season is expected to be worse. I feel like they say that every year.
I was just going to say, they don't know.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I kind of agree with you on that.
And if there's very few storms come September 1st, they revise the outlook,
Right, exactly. But it only takes one. As they say, it only takes the one to hit us. So later on in the show, we're going to have to talk about Governor DeSantis. He's just not taking it anymore. He's fighting back. He just no.
I don't know if livid would be the proper word, but he was very forceful in his defense yesterday.
And can you blame him?
No, not at all.
I can't blame him. So we'll get to that in a moment and other stuff as well. But I was thinking about this today. I want to read something that I posted on Facebook back in January, just to give some perspective on how one thing I said was right, but where we've gone in this country in just the past couple of months because of the pandemic. I posted this January 8th on my Facebook. That's why I said, there is no doubt that the economy is great right now. The Democrats are trying to say that it's not good for everyone, but most of the indicators show that most people are benefiting from it. Consumer confidence is high, unemployment is low, the stock market is still making major gains, energy production is good, wages are rising, inflation is low, and many businesses are thriving. This will be pretty good for Trump's re-election chances. So, back in January, things are looking great when it comes to the economy. I did say this as well, though. While the economy is good right now, I do still have some concerns for the future. I'm afraid we're creating an unsustainable debt bubble. Outstanding consumer debt, and this is probably worse now, but outstanding consumer debt is about $4 trillion. Student loan debt is $1.4 trillion. And mortgage debt is over $15 trillion. That doesn't include the $23 trillion in federal debt. Some say this really isn't a big deal. Trump even wants the Fed to go to negative interest rates, which would fuel even more borrowing. Remember, I said this back in January. I'm not so optimistic. While everything seems good now, it just takes something like a rise in fuel prices to pop this bubble. Now, I was wrong on what might pop the bubble, but that wasn't my point. I said I wasn't optimistic because all it took was some kind of crisis to automatically pop this bubble. I said this back in January. I said here, it should also be noted that the government keeps screwing up certain parts of the economy. Well, that's the truth. While prices for most things have dropped over the years, the costs of healthcare, housing, and education keep rising exponentially, fueled by government regulations and subsidies. And the reason I point that out, something I said back in January, something I was warning about, that too much of this economy is based too much on debt. And I'm not just talking about government debt. I'm talking about consumer debt, and I'm talking about business debt. And local governments are now in deep trouble. State governments are now in deep trouble because they spend too much. And it was built on borrowing and debt. Well, this from Business Insider today. Americans fall behind on nearly 18 million credit card and auto loan payments last month. See, what's happening, one thing that's happening in the economy that's going bad is when you have everything built on debt, it doesn't take much. It only takes a month for everything to start kind of falling apart. All of a sudden, people can't make those debt payments, and things start to fall apart. Now, we say that this isn't going to happen with the federal government. No. Federal debt doesn't seem to matter. It's just all the other debt. Not so sure about that. Says here in the Business Insider, the proportion of credit card accounts entering financial hardship programs surged in April by 3.2% to 14.7 million. Auto loans notched a similar uptick with 3.5% or nearly 3 million accounts falling into hardship status. The government's $2 trillion stimulus bill created some options for debt-addled Americans, but banks and lenders are looking for further regulatory guidance. It says millions of Americans are struggling to pay down their debt. All I have to say is I warned you. That's all I have to say here. When you look at the economy in the future, we have to stop building an economy that is completely built on too much debt. I know I'm starting to sound like Dave Ramsey or something. I'm not Dave Ramsey. Dave Ramsey, much more successful than I am, obviously. On this, he's on this station, obviously. I'm not someone who's against all debt. You have to have some borrowing to fuel an economy. Startups need some kind of borrowing to be able to start their business. You need investment and all that stuff. But I just say, I've been warning about this for a while, that I feel like too much of this economy is built on debt. And I feel like our government is making this worse and has been for a long time because we've kept interest rates so artificially low that the incentive to save is practically nothing. I do that other show, Money Talks, and we talk about some of the interest rates you can make on your savings account. It's like 0.03% or something like that. It's practically nothing. The incentive to really save your money isn't there. So we're just making this worse. And the government, of course, is going to make this even worse because they want to spend even more money. Well, that debt has to be repaid. People say that the new monetary theory is that doesn't matter. But this is all just contributing to an economy that's been built on debt. And it only took one crisis that's only lasted a couple of months to really pop that bubble and things start to really, really fall apart. But I fear that we're not going to learn our lesson. The last recession was kind of caused by too much debt. People were taking on subprime loans that couldn't afford it. And now I'm afraid that this is possibly going to be even worse. But I just pointed this back out in January. I was thinking about that as I see these reports about how credit has really become a big problem. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
Subscribe to the Beyond Reason podcast today on your Stitcher app and hear the voice of reason anytime. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffee is back right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is another edition of Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. Don't forget, follow me on Twitter. I'm always posting good stuff on Twitter, and I always get the trolls, too, so you can troll the trolls if you want to. You know, I mean, I don't know.
On and on it goes, huh?
Yeah, I guess. I don't really pay too much attention, but you can follow me on Twitter at Michael Yaffee. One of my trolls was really mad at me today, Tom Benson, because I said, and I've said this on my show a number of times, but I tweeted this out, and I'm going to say it again.
Uh-oh.
He can't believe, he just couldn't believe I could say this with a straight face, so I'm going to say it right now with a straight face.
All right.
Thank God Governor Ron DeSantis is our governor.
I've heard that before.
Thank God Ron DeSantis is our governor. Is that good?
And your troll is against that for what reason? What's the reason he gives?
They don't give reasons.
Oh, they just, I see. Yeah.
You don't understand trolling on Twitter, Tom Benson.
All right.
So yesterday on the show, if you missed the show, you can catch the podcast. It's still up there. It's how, it's how podcasts work, so go listen to it. I talked a little bit about how DeSantis has gotten a bad rap and how he's fighting back. Well, that was before I had heard the audio from DeSantis yesterday when he was in Orlando with Mike Pence, and he was taking questions from the media, and
something set him off.
Yeah, he's just not having. A lot of it has to do with the issue of that person who was fired. Mm-hmm. She said she was fired because they wanted her to change the death count, and she didn't want to do it, and she was fired. And DeSantis is like, no.
There's more to the story.
No. She's been accused of, sexual harassment. She was insubordinate. She should have been fired months ago. We are transparent about all the data we put out there. And you could tell he was just sick of it. Like, come on, people. Stop listening to this stuff. But in terms of the media narrative against Governor DeSantis, he went off yesterday. Here's what he said.
Our data is available. Our data is transparent. In fact, Dr. Birx has talked multiple times about how Florida has the absolute best data. So any insinuation otherwise is just typical partisan narrative trying to be spun. And part of the reason is that because you got a lot of people in your profession who waxed poetically for weeks and weeks about how Florida was going to be just like New York. Wait 2 weeks, Florida's going to be next. Just like Italy, wait 2 weeks. Well, hell, we're 8 weeks away from that, and it hasn't happened. Not only do we have a lower death rate, well, we have way lower deaths generally. We have a lower death rate than the Acela Corridor, D.C., everyone up there. We have a lower death rate than the Midwest, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. But even in our region, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida has the lower death rate. And I was the #1 landing spot from tens of thousands of people leaving the #1 hot zone in the world to come to my state. So we've succeeded, and I think that people just don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try to find a boogeyman. Maybe it's that there are black helicopters circling the Department of Health. If you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn I'd like to sell you.
He is not happy, but he's exactly right. How could you blame him? Imagine being Governor DeSantis. You're looking at how successful your state has been. That they were projecting over 7,000 deaths in Florida by this point. That's what they were projecting. We're not even close to that. Imagine that. Imagine then the media is still blasting you constantly because you didn't want to shut down the entire society, didn't want to get rid of religious freedom, didn't close the beaches fast enough, which they found out really didn't make much of a difference. You're looking at all this. You're looking at the results. They're missing all the good things you did. And then you turn on the media and you see them praising Governor Cuomo of New York, who has had way more deaths and way more problems.
And he has a growing controversy over patients dying in nursing homes.
Exactly. And that brings me to my next one. I mean, you can't blame DeSantis for being as upset as he is. Now, I'm not saying he's been perfect. I don't think anyone could be perfect in this situation. But seriously, who can blame him for fighting back? Now, why do you think, though, the death rate has been so much lower in the state of Florida? What is it? I personally think that it's the fact that we protected the nursing homes first. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, this pandemic in history will be remembered, of course, for the shutdowns and the economic catastrophe. But it will also be remembered mostly as a nursing home pandemic because it's really affected the nursing homes more than anything else. And New York and New York City did not protect the nursing homes. But as I pointed out yesterday, that was one of the first things Governor DeSantis did. He looked at the data from South Korea. He noticed that this affected the elderly a lot more than it affected young people. and he said, okay, we have a lot of nursing homes in our state because, of course, we're Florida. Maybe the first thing we should do is protect the nursing homes. And that's exactly what he did. It makes total sense. And when you look at states like Pennsylvania, you look at states like New York, you will see that a lot of the deaths are elderly. The vast majority of the deaths are elderly, and a whole lot of them are happening in the nursing homes. So the fact that he decided to really shut down the nursing homes first and protect the nursing homes first, I think is what made the biggest difference. Here's the question I have, though. Do Democrats really even want the economy to come back like it was? Outside of, not wanting Trump to get reelected.
Starting in November 4th, yes.
Starting November 4th, they'll be all about getting back.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wonder, and I'll tell you why. I have some examples of that coming up in the next time. A couple of Democrats talking about what to do in the future, and I keep thinking, do they even want the economy to come back? This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
Yes, welcome back to the show. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. A lot more to get to on the show. This is the question that I have for you, and I really just keep wondering this. Do Democrats want the economy to come back? Are Democrats interested in actually getting people back to work? Actually getting the economy back to where it needs to be? It seems like no. It seems like they would much prefer people stay in their homes and stay locked down and just receive more and more unemployment checks. Now, one of the reasons this has come up is people are starting to realize, a lot of the businesses were starting to realize that, we want our employees to come back to work. And the employee said, no, thanks. I'm getting more on unemployment. Why would I come back to work? One Democrat, I think, argues here that that's a good thing. This was on MSNBC with Chris Hayes, and Senator Sherrod Brown said this.
What do you want to see happen concretely for workers as we reopen?
Well, I think about you're a worker who's been laid off. You're getting unemployment now, so you're not going to get evicted. Your kids are going to be fairly well provided for. Not great. You've taken an income hit, but you're home and you're drawing unemployment benefits at least for 4 more months. Then you're called back to work and you're not sure your employer has made your workplace safe. So you're going to give up your unemployment insurance. You're going to go back to work. You have no choice, and you're just not sure it's safe. I was talking to a grocery store worker in Cincinnati who said, they say I'm essential, but they don't pay me well. They don't protect me at work. I feel like I'm expendable. And that's what workers are facing. If for one time, if this administration has betrayed workers time and time again, as you know, Chris, if one time they would wear the shoes, walk in the shoes of a worker who's facing this terrible problem on sick days or on going back to work, not sure the workplace is safe because they know that we have a president who wants people to go back to work at all costs, even in slaughterhouses where hundreds of people get sick, where the line moves too fast, where the employers have shown no history of worker safety except what the government makes them do. And the president wants to weaken those standards and put them all back into the maelstrom of a dangerous workplace. And
every time I listen to a Democrat speak, I'm like, man, America's such a terrible place to live. Why would I ever want to do that? But it just sounds like to me that he doesn't want, the businesses are trying to get people to come back to work. And he said, no, it's dangerous. Stay in your homes. Oh, they're just expendable. I mean, the worst thing for the workers is for them to lose a job. At least that's what it used to be, right? But it sounds like he's saying, well, they're getting unemployment. they'll just stay home and collect government checks.
Could the next possible thing be, well, if you want to leave your home, get permission from the government?
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, man.
Maybe. But he makes it seem like these people are scared to come back to work. Now, there might be some who are scared. But eventually we're going to have to open up, right? Eventually we're going to have to get these people back to work. When is it going to be good enough for Sherrod Brown to finally stop just handing out government checks to people staying at home and allowing them to get back to work? When will he be okay with it?
When they start running short of food at his supermarket where he shops, then you'll see action.
And then, he was complaining about the Trump's executive order against the executive order to keep the meat packing plants running. And he's saying, oh, how could Trump do that? Because we need to eat. Because we need our food. So I just feel like sometimes when I listen to them, he just they don't want people to go back to work. Just stay in your homes. We'll just hand you checks. Because I just have a feeling it's not going to be safe. It will never be safe enough for him to finally be like, okay, you can start going back to work. And this is the big thing I'm worried about with all of this, is once people get used to the idea of just receiving unemployment checks from the government and staying home, it's going to be very, very difficult. The longer this goes on, it's going to be very, very difficult to keep out of it. And what's going to come next? Oh, universal basic income. That's what they're really after here. We are going to end up creating a permanent welfare state in this country. A giant permanent welfare state where a large proportion of the country is just dependent on government checks. If we don't change things soon enough, the longer this goes on, the harder and harder it will be to get out of it. Now, one person who wants that, I guess, was former presidential candidate Andrew Yang. He's been pushing for universal basic income, just hand out checks to everyone. And he was asked about this problem with unemployment, that it's a disincentive for people to go back to work because they make more off unemployment than they do if they keep their jobs. Here was the question and his response on CNN.
And we have to face fact that 42% of these jobs will not come back. You're looking at essentially long-standing or permanent job loss of 15 million plus. And for reference, the Great Recession cost us less than 9 million jobs. So you're looking at something almost 2 times the Great Recession permanently. This is one reason why I'm advocating that our federal government has to pass enormous stimulus measures to keep us from teetering into a new Great Depression, because that, unfortunately, is where we are heading right now.
So he was asked about the unemployment thing. His solution is, well, the money shouldn't be even be conditional to unemployment. You should just get it, because the economy is just never going to come back. People are never going to be able to find jobs, and they need money, so we'll just hand them checks. Or the government will just spend lots and lots of money, and that's the solution. I can't believe this is the solution. The solution really should be, how do we get the economy back up and running? How do we let the free marketplace work? How do we get people back to work? And yet all I hear from the Democrats is, well, the real solution is to get them to stay home, and we'll just keep sending them government checks. How is this a real solution? Somebody please try to inform me on how this is a real solution. So, by the way, I just found an interesting article from Bloomberg by a guy named Joe Nocera, an opinion piece, and thought it was interesting. It says here, lockdowns haven't proved they're worth the havoc. It says, my junior and senior years in high school were 1968 and 1969. 5 decades later, I can still remember some of the main events of that era. Martin Luther King being assassinated, Apollo 8, Woodstock, all of this stuff. In my personal life, he says, I remember playing basketball, buying my first car, yada, yada, yada. Yet there was one. It was called the H3N2 virus, also known as the Hong Kong flu. Oh, those racists calling it the Hong Kong flu. He said it took a significant toll. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has estimated that 1 million people died worldwide. 100,000 in the U.S. died from it. Conditions in large U.S. cities sound similar to what they're going through now, with overwhelmed hospital workers, millions of people getting sick, and the elderly most likely to die. Says, when I first read about this pandemic, I could scarcely believe that I had missed it. So it's apparently a big pandemic that happened in 1968 and 69. He lived during it, and he doesn't even remember it because we reacted completely different back then. Said, according to the recent article in the Wall Street Journal, the virus wreaked havoc in Europe, with French manufacturers suffering severe disruptions and West German garbage collectors burying the dead because there weren't enough undertakers. In the U.S., the New York Times reported the Citadel had to suspend classes between 165 cadets who came down with the virus. A quick search confirms that the Times had covered the pandemic at the time, but I didn't read the Times when I was in high school, yada, yada, yada. He says, from our current perspective, with shelter-in-place rules in much of the country, the most striking thing about the contemporaneous accounts was the absence of any discussion of lockdowns or even social distancing. I saw few photos of nurses and office workers wearing masks, but that apparently wasn't mandated either. Even the occasional school closings were one-offs. Not a single state ordered that school or businesses be closed en masse. The virus swept across the world, causing tens of millions of people to become sick and killing nearly 3 times the number of people who have died so far of COVID-19. And the world's chief mitigation effort was the race to make a vaccine. By the time one was ready, the pandemic had largely fizzled out. So he says all of this raises a question that has so far been relegated to a small handful of coronavirus contrarians. With all the businesses that are going to fail and the tens of millions of people who will be unemployed and the other negative consequences that come with forcing people to stay home, will the lockdown have been worth it? Or would we have been better off doing something closer to what the country did in 1968? Yes, taking precautions like wearing masks, washing hands, and protecting the elderly, but allowing businesses and schools to stay open while people went about their lives. I think he's right there. He says one issue is that there is surprisingly little evidence that the lockdowns work. Last week, a statistician who was in the anti-lockdown camp wrote a blog post comparing countries that locked down with countries that didn't. As of May 12th, the U.S. had 237 deaths per million people. Taiwan, a no-lockdown country, had 0.3 deaths per million. So he says, let's see here. Let me point out the other fact about the pandemic in the late 1960s. Like many coronaviruses, the H3N2 virus came in waves. The last one began in the fall of 1969 and ended in early 1970. Assuming the coronavirus fades in the summer, there is a high likelihood that it will return with a vengeance in the fall and winter. If that happens, are we truly ready to lock down again? He says, I don't think so. He says, frankly, there is little evidence that it happened, and we didn't do it back in the 1960s, and society still went on, and we didn't have the economic catastrophe that we're going to have now from this virus. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffee. We will be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
So am I really supposed to care that Trump didn't wear a mask at the press conference today at the Ford plant? Is this really a big deal? Or is this just one of these, lack of a better term, a trumped up controversies? Because, okay, so President Trump, it's being reported, brought a mask with him to tour a Ford plant today in Michigan. Mm-hmm. But he said he didn't want to give the press the pleasure of seeing him wear it while he was on camera. Apparently, according to a statement, he did wear the mask when he was asked to wear a mask. He wore a mask during a private viewing of 3 Ford GTs from over the years. The president later removed the mask for the remainder of the visit. He said, while speaking without a face covering next to others wearing masks, the president added the masks were not necessary in front of the plant where he was standing. They're not necessary here. Everybody's been tested. In fact, I was tested this morning, so it's not necessary. I was given a choice, and I had one on in an area where they preferred it. He continued, I honestly think I look better in the mask, but I'm making a speech, so I won't have it now. Okay. Sounds fine to me. I just don't, I feel like this is just one of those things that we're trying to create a controversy based on perception and optics more than actually having an actual controversy. Why should he wear a mask in that situation? He was tested that day. He's with other people wearing masks. He's talking to reporters. He's about to make a speech. We want him to wear a mask while he's making a speech.
He's supposed to set a good example.
Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
It's just the perception thing?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe he should. I don't know. I mean, he's obviously just trolling the media at this point. That's exactly what he was doing today with this. Maybe you shouldn't do that all the time, but I'm just like, the media is trying to get me to care about this issue so much with the mask thing. And I just don't care. I never really expected the president to be wearing a mask everywhere. Especially he's being tested every day. Like, what's the point? I just don't understand. They really want me to care, and I just don't care. I just don't care. So another issue that's out there today, a lot of conservatives are upset at the Cuomo brothers. You have Governor Cuomo, and then you have Chris Cuomo on CNN. They do kind of their buddy-buddy stuff because Chris Cuomo interviews his brother. And they were kind of joking around last night talking about him getting tested. And a lot of conservatives are upset at this, and I frankly don't understand why. Here it is. Here's the exchange.
I have a little button nose, and she was afraid that the swab would actually hurt because it extended my nasal cavity.
The proboscis issue.
Speaking about the delicacy of
the nose. And that's what, I understand. This is the normal swab I'm holding up here now for everybody at home. A very valuable object. There's only one company in the entire country that makes these up in Maine. All right, here's the swab. Is it true that this was the swab
then he holds up a bigger
that the nurse
swab,
was actually
like a
using on you, and that at first it went into your nose and disappeared, so that in scale, this was the actual swab that was being used.
And he holds up a giant
to fit
swab.
up that double-barrel shotgun that you have mounted on the front of your pretty face.
So if it was a Q-tip, it would be a triple Q-tip, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So a lot of conservatives were upset at this, saying they were making light of the situation there, and it's not true journalism. I got to tell you, I'm just going to say this to a lot of my conservative friends out there. You're not going to be successful making this an issue. Most people that watch that are going to laugh. They're going to say, hey, look, your brothers are being kind of funny, jabbing at each other. It's kind of a lighter moment. Are we not allowed to have lighter moments now just because there's a pandemic? This is like the other side where this was like a controversy by someone on the right, and I was like, it's kind of funny. We're not allowed to laugh now. They're brothers, so what? We know they're brothers. Who cares?
That's why the ratings are down in the toilet.
Well,
so
yeah, that's true. I mean, I get it.
Take solace in that.
I mean, I get it because people are upset at the media hypocrisy. They're really hard on Governor Ron DeSantis. And then they give all this praise to Governor Cuomo, and I get it, but it was just on Twitter and everywhere. We're making a big deal about this. I'm supposed to be very upset at this segment, And I don't, it seems fine. I don't care. They're laughing. It's fine.
What if the position was reversed? What if it was two Fox News or Fox entertaining talking heads doing it? Then the press would go berserk.
Well, and okay, the hypocrisy I get. Yeah. There definitely is a double standard. And I totally understand the double standard. I totally agree with the double standard. There's no doubt the left and the Twitter trolls would be all over it if it was a Fox News segment. Let's say if Peter Ducey was doing a segment like this with his son, or they both work for Fox News or something. Are they making light of the pandemic? But it was kind of funny. It was kind of a nice moment to me. They're brothers. So what? By the way, quickie, I just happened to look at the Babylon Bee, that satire site. A headline here where we were talking about DeSantis. This is the headline.
Uh-huh.
Florida ruled to be in violation of science for not having more people die. Oh, yeah. I love the Babylon Bee. I'm just saying. All right, appreciate you listening to the show. I am hosting Good Morning Orlando tomorrow here on News Radio WFLA Orlando. So check it out, 6 to 9 a.m. Alan Spector and Melissa Fox will be here as well. Don't forget, if you missed any of the show today, you can catch the podcast anywhere the podcasts are available. Download the iHeart Radio app. Listen, share with your friends, post it on your social media, all that stuff. And, well, have a good weekend, and I'll catch you guys next time.